So enough time has passed, and I'm pretty sure most people who enjoy horror games are aware of the whole thing going on with Markiplier and his critique of Poppy Playtime Chapter 5. Apparently a lot of people didn't really like what he had to say because he was being too mean about it or something, and honestly I can't even blame him. For those who are unaware of what Mark said, I'll insert a clip here for some context.
This was a fucking mess. I am saying this because, and I have this policy, right? If it's the first game in a new series, if it's the second, third, I can be more forgiving of things finding its footing. This is chapter fucking 5, right? I should know the motivation very clearly. I should know where I'm going. I should know why I'm going to it. I should know exactly what the character motivations are. That one guy couldn't tell you why he was the escort this time around. As much as I like the hair girl, that was fucking random. As random as random could be, being like, hey, here's a cool set piece. It's now it's happening. Now is this fun. It doesn't matter if that set piece is interesting. I like the aesthetic of that a lot better. It was random. Why was that there? Just to be an obstacle. That's it. It didn't have any cohesion to the story. There was this, like, I missed, of course, some videotapes. But when you're playing a game, you should know why A is connected to B and then C. And I'm sure that there might be some very thin threading between there if you get the VHS, but my fear is that there's not. My fear is that even if I had gotten all of them, there would be no threading, because I don't see how you could possibly justify going from where we were to where we ended up to leaving that place and it mattering nothing, right? Mattering nothing to it. Here's an interesting character gone. His character's interesting gone. This character's interesting to be around you for a bit. Gone. Now my worst part about this, for me personally, is I don't know if the developers of this game think it's just their thing. We're the chase sequence game. We're the game of chase sequences. We are the chase sequence game. That was in the first one, people loved it. And then the second one, remember when Mommy Longlegs would chase you? Oh, you fucking nuts. We're in the third one when we put more chase sequences in. Remember the fourth one? The chase sequences. Maybe we'll tone down a little bit for the fourth. Fifth one, chase. I do not like my gameplay to be trial and error, right? Every time it did it, the stakes were lower, right? And that's really the issue that I have with it. From a mechanical perspective, chase sequence is fine if it's well designed and it can be fun and it's like in a key moment where it's there and it makes sense. But the problem is this one, especially chapter 5, holy fuck, half the entire game was chase sequences. And it just because it's doing them again and again, it suddenly has to introduce, oh, here's a new thing in here. A chase sequence is not the time to introduce a new mechanic. I don't even care if something is not just like, oh, decouple the train cars. It's like, to learn that, the vast majority of people are going to die to that. And in a chase sequence, as I've said before in these games, as soon as you die, it loses all of its value. To do it again, to go through it and be like, oh, I remember how this goes now. Oh, I've learned this now. The whole point of a chase sequence is to be a climactic moment where the stakes are very high and you have to quickly think on your feet of all the mechanics that you've mastered through the entire experience that you've been doing it. And if you fail, it's your fault as the player. If you fail in that moment, it's your fault because you didn't apply the mechanics that you've been learning the entire fucking game. And it had that. I'm not even saying it didn't have that, but it's like, oh my God, enough!
He had a lot of valid points regarding this chapter. Honestly, a lot of his points are relevant to the entirety of Poppy Playtime, but that's a topic for another day. Also, just for clarification, I have not played Poppy Playtime myself, but I have done my research, so I'm not just talking out of my ass. And for further clarification, this video isn't necessarily me coming up here to defend Mark personally, but rather just his and honestly many other content creators' takes on this chapter. But majority of what I will be talking about is in relation to what Markiplier had to say. I'll mostly be talking about the story elements because that's the part that I can mostly speak for. The gameplay I will cover, but not as in-depth because, again, I haven't played it for myself. And again, because this is a Poppy Playtime video, I will be going into Chapter 5 and, honestly, spoilers for the other chapters as well. So, forewarning. For the background clips, YouTube, all of this is fake. Please don't nuke me. Thank you. The reason I even decided to make my opinions into a video in the first place was because I saw somebody talking about the situation on TikTok. To be completely transparent, I did not watch the entire video because I just didn't really care to. So this isn't a critique of that creator's take as a whole, but rather one specific line of it that really caught my attention. That being, people don't enjoy stories when they're not handed to them on a silver platter, which I consider somewhat untrue, mostly just because people can and very much do enjoy stories that are meant to be found. But in the situation regarding Poppy Playtime, it's not that the story has to be found is the reason that people aren't enjoying it. It's because the story is just presented in a way that isn't compelling. Half the time, you're just running around in silence doing puzzles or something. There's not much really happening a lot of the time. There's no story happening. The concept of the story is insanely interesting, but the way they go about showing it just doesn't really make you want to be curious enough to go figure out more. It feels monotonous, really, because Poppy Playtime does not know how to flesh out their story. I absolutely agree you should not have to state everything going on point blank period for it to make sense, but at the same time, you still do have to talk about it in a way that's meaningful enough that it can push the story along. One game that I think that does this method of storytelling pretty well is Mouthwashing. You don't really understand what's happening at first, but as the story unfolds, they start dropping more context clues, and it helps you grasp a little bit more what's going on. And then after you're done the game, you're meant to sit with what's happening and figure it out. And in my opinion, Mouthwashing has quite the compelling story, and it managed to do that in 3 hours. Poppy Playtime is at chapter 5, and we still really don't understand what's going on. We have sort of like the gist of what's going on in the story, but we aren't really being told like what the deeper meaning of it all is. Like, in chapter 1, they had that VHS tape with the interview with Stella where she was talking about wanting to go back to being a little girl again, and I thought that was a really interesting plot point because, like, is that why they're making people toys so they can be eternally young? But I don't really think they expand on it more after that. Like, a majority of what they talk about in terms of the experiments is just like, yeah, we're doing this thing and we're trying to make it successful, but like, what's the goal? Why are we doing this? They don't ever talk about it, and I really wish they would because the concept is so interesting. Like, I don't think there's any actual confirmation as to why Elliot Ludwig specifically started doing all this. I think most of it is just speculation, but there's nothing from like the actual in-game files that tell us like this is why he's doing it. And it doesn't really make sense because almost all the information we're getting about the game is from people on the inside, so why aren't we hearing anything from Elliot Ludwig or any of the other important employees? Additionally, up until maybe chapter 3, we don't really start getting any serious outside perspectives on what's going on. We could have had one right off the bat with the protagonist, but unfortunately they don't speak. I think having them comment on what's going on in Playtime Co. as somebody who used to be on the inside but is now on the outside would have been really interesting and would have been that thing to help move the story along. It also would have given us more insight into who they are as a person, because up until this point in the story, we have no idea who the main character is. All that we really know is that they're an ex-employee who's going back to Playtime Co. to investigate the disappearances of the other employees, but why? What connection do they have to Playtime Co.? What level of employee were they? Were they a higher up? Did they know this was happening? Are they coming back out of some sort of guilt to try and right the wrongs of the things that they've participated in? Why did they decide to even come back in the first place instead of just turning a blind eye? What kind of person are they that makes them want to do this? I think the fact that we don't have any of this information makes the story fall very flat. The main character is the driving point, but there's zero depth to them. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have a character speak all the time for them to have depth. I'm not gonna go super deep into this example, but Joker from Persona 5. He's a silent protagonist, all his dialogue options are picked by the player, but even within those, there's things that we can glean about who he is as a person, as well as some of his actions that are not controlled by the player. He's very justice-oriented, and he's willing to sacrifice a lot of himself for the people that he loves. Now, obviously, Persona 5 is a very different game than Poppy Playtime, so a more relevant example, I think, would be Outlast. None of the Outlast protagonists speak in any of their games. The only way they react to things is through notes. That's the thing that gives us insight into the characters. Additionally, just like in terms of how the story's set up, Outlast also really likes to use notes to deepen the plot. But the story is set up in a way that it's compelling from the beginning. From the very first note that we read in Miles Upshore's car, we can tell he's a journalist and he's being asked to come investigate what's going on at Mount Massive because Murkoff is going insane. Poppy Playtime also loves to use notes and files to further their story, so why couldn't they do the same thing for their protagonist? It would have given the story a much more interesting setup right off the bat if we knew what we were doing and if we kind of knew what was going on. Also, going back to the files and the documents, a lot of them are very missable. So having a majority of your story be within parts of the game that a lot of people are not going to be able to find is not very good story setup. Again, Outlast, similar thing. Some of the files are hard to find and they are missable as well, but you still can glean enough from what you're seeing that you don't have to read about it. Unfortunately, with Poppy Playtime, you can't really understand on a deeper level what's going on unless you read the files. And honestly, a lot of what they talk about in the files is just sort of repetitive. We get a lot of the same information just about like experiment logs, and don't get me wrong, I find that stuff kind of interesting, but it's very repetitive. I really do wish they could have condensed it down and given more time for the deeper lore of the story to breathe and actually have its moment. This becomes especially frustrating in Chapter 5 because in the original plan, based off of what the original creator said, Chapter 5 was supposed to be the end of the story. We are supposed to be hitting a climax here, but we are still not done. We still have so much to learn when we could have learned all that in the previous 4 chapters. Like, there's really no reason for them to continue dragging the story along. They had enough time to flesh it out. And honestly, if you ask me, my most honest personal opinion, it's starting to feel a bit like a cash grab. especially considering the whole NFT controversy that happened, but I digress. We've gotten so deep into the factory, but it feels like we haven't actually properly achieved anything. I understand we're still trying to make our way out, and that's not what I'm mad about. I'm just saying in terms of like the story development, it just feels like it's been a lot of the same thing. Like every time we're close to getting out of the factory, there's some sort of setback, and then we have to go through a cliffhanger, wait until the next chapter comes out just to do it all again. It gets very annoying and just boring after a while. It's not fun after the 5th time you've had to do that. Also, going back to us being deep in the factory, I still do not understand why this place is so big. I understand they made it underground because they needed to hide their experiments, but the layout just does not make sense, and it makes the world building feel cheap. The story, and by extension, a lot of the factory does not feel like it's building off of the previous chapter. It feels like it's a completely new thing. They have this issue with the cast too. Characters like Catnap, Giblet, Doughy, Lily Lovebraids, they get introduced to these chapters without even being previously mentioned once. It ruins a lot of the immersion because, this is especially present in chapter 5. With characters like Giblet, it feels like we're just expected to know who he is, but he isn't introduced in anything other than like a cardboard cutout, which unfortunately does not have the right impact for a good character introduction. It's the same thing with Lily Lovebraids. She was genuinely one of my favorite characters this chapter. The whole concept of her being Miss Gracie and being sort of conscious of it, I really, really wish they expanded on, but they just didn't for some reason, and it was very upsetting because I wanted to understand more about her, but they just, like Mark said, oh, interesting character, gone. She's dead. And that's it. There's just really no anticipation for these characters. They're introduced very poorly, and then they're thrown away. They're very expendable in the eyes of the writers, and it's upsetting because they could be very interesting if they wanted them to be. And again, it's a very similar thing with the story. They had potential, but they just didn't do anything with it. And honestly, the gameplay doesn't help with the monotony of the story either. It's very similar in the sense that it's the exact same thing over and over and over again. You do the same 3 puzzles for hours on end just to get absolutely nowhere. Not to mention, it just doesn't look all that pleasant either, especially in terms of the grab pack. That thing has the jankiest mechanics I've seen in any game ever. I don't understand how people can sit through that. It also doesn't help that they're heavily used during the chase sequences too, which in and of itself are very much a problem because they're so oversaturated and the directions are just absolutely awful. Going back to what Markiplier said, he said something along the lines of how chase sequences shouldn't be trial and error, and I agree fully because chase sequences are meant to be a moment of like adrenaline and quick thinking on your feet. You're not supposed to really memorize how they go. You're supposed to figure it out as you're going. But because of the way the directioning is in Poppy Playtime, it just doesn't work. They fail to be good chase sequences. Their poor design makes it so that every single time you go through them, the stakes feel lower and lower. Getting to a new section stops feeling rewarding and it starts feeling frustrating. Because at some point, you're not even scared of messing up and dying. You know you're going to mess up and die, so you'll have to do the whole sequence over and over again until you get it right. On the topic of repetition, I actually want to go back to the general puzzles in the game. I will give Mob Entertainment their credit where credit is due because the puzzles are very unique. I've never seen anything like them in any other game before. The design of the puzzles are a very strong point. However, the way they go about using them, very much like the chase sequences, they're oversaturated, they're too much, it gets boring. They're literally stationed at almost every single door in the game. And I understand this is supposed to be a puzzle game, but I'm sure there were many other ways they could have gone about implementing the puzzles that felt more fun than what they currently are. Diverting attention to another very weak point of Poppy Playtime, the game's honestly just not scary. I'd say the only thing that genuinely gave me the creeps throughout the entire franchise was the VHS tapes that you find in the game and also the ones that play before every chapter. Those are genuinely really good. I like them a lot, but the creep factor just falls flat everywhere. As much as I enjoyed the art style and the environment, I think it kind of comes back to bite the game in the ass by just making everything not scary, like, at all. I'm pretty easily spooked as well, but I really don't find myself creeped out by anything in this game, again, other than the VHS tapes. Despite what it seems like, I do actually think Poppy Playtime has its strong points. Chapters 1 and 2 are personally where I think the series was at its strongest, especially Chapter 2. Chapter 1 was a nice introduction, and I really liked the minigames in Chapter 2. In Chapter 3, I thought the final catnap encounter was cool, and I really liked the play care design. Miss Delight was cool too. I like the Weeping Angel mechanic. I also really liked Dog Day in the prison. That was fucking crazy. I can't recall all that much from Chapter 4, but I did like Doey and Poppy and their conflicting interests. In Chapter 5, I loved the memory chamber where you played as Huggy and had to grind the bad toys. That was freaky. I liked Lily Lovebraids, but I wish they treated her like she wasn't just there for story padding because she was interesting. I really like the prototype design. A lot of people don't, but I think it's cool as hell. Sure, it looks a bit like Pomni, but it's fine. And like I said before, I think the overall story concept is really interesting. So to finally answer the question, was Chapter 5 really that bad? In my personal opinion, yes. But everybody is entitled to their own opinion, and obviously this was an opinion-based video essay. If you like Chapter 5, that's great for you. If you don't, also great for you. I think we should all hold hands and get along. Stop going for each other's throats. Because I've seen a lot of people get really defensive about this chapter. Not sure why. And as disappointed as I was with it, I probably will be holding out hope for Poppy Playtime Chapter 6, and I will be watching it. So crossing my fingers, hopefully Mom Entertainment sees what people have said about it and try to improve a bit, because that's all we want. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and if there's anything I missed, please feel free to point it out, and I'm open for debate in the comments.